Hey y'all, Erin here. I am filming my May reading wrap-up. I'm gonna try and keep this short and sweet because it's hotter than hell in my bedroom and I should probably have just filmed this downstairs, but then I would have to put pants on, and I love y'all, but not that much. Not enough to put pants back on. So, I know I said my next video was going to be my review of the Poppy Wars, and I did film one, and I just feel like it's rambly and not that good and not really worth posting. So maybe at some point I'll post it. Maybe I'll just film another. I don't know. Setting that aside for now and talking about what I read in May instead. So the first book that I finished in May was The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. So I read Raybearer and then the Gilded Ones back to back, and I think that might have been a mistake because it was too easy to compare the two, and that made the Gilded Ones kind of come off second best, which I think was unfair to it because it wasn't necessarily, like, there wasn't anything bad about the Gilded Ones, it just wasn't spectacular the way that Raybearer was, and the strength for both of them was the world building, and so that kind of, like I said, it just made comparison a little too easy. So the world building is still fantastic in the Gilded Ones. I really liked the idea of, I mean, I didn't like the idea, it was very patriarchal and gross, but as a device in a story, I liked the idea of people being impure or having this golden blood, and that meant that they were part demon, but it also meant that they had these spectacular powers that would let them fight the other demons on behalf of humanity. I don't want to talk about the ending because I don't want to spoil anything, and I would still definitely recommend reading this book. But I will say that the message is very heavy-handed and not subtle. I found the end very easy to predict, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not like upset when I can easily predict the end of a book, but I will say that this one was not a surprise. And I followed that with Twisted, The Tangled History of Black Hair Culture by Emma Dabiri. And this was one that Ashley from Bookish Realms had recommended in her video, like the 100 books that she thinks everyone should read. And it intrigued me. So my best friend when I was in elementary school was Black, and you know, I was like typical little white kid, was fascinated with her hair, and I didn't really understand why my fascination might be upsetting to her. I recognized that it did, and I stopped trying to, like, you know, get her to let me play with it, which was all I wanted. All I've ever wanted is hair that just stays where it's put, okay? And I was so deeply jealous that her mom could put these intricate styles in her hair, and it seemed like this wonderful time that she got to spend with her mother, and I was jealous. And so it was really interesting reading, you know, I watched the documentary Good Hair years ago, and that kind of cleared up a lot of the feelings that I could see that she was having, and this book, I think, wasn't so much about hair specifically, but it uses Black hair and the culture around it as jumping off points for essays about greater issues in the world, and it was really good. I will definitely pick up my own copy. I wish that I had just purchased it to begin with. I got it from the library, and a lot of the pictures just weren't as good in an e-reader on my phone as they would have been in an actual physical book, because there were some spectacular hair pictures in there. So yeah, really glad that I picked that one up. It gave me a lot of insight into a culture that is obviously not my own, and that I did not know much about. And I especially loved the last chapter that talked about mathematics and braids and fractals and the concept of infinity. And I tried to explain to my husband, who's like super into math and math history, oh hi baby, why it was so good, but I'd already returned it to the library at that point, so I didn't have it to read to him, and I couldn't remember all of the specific details well enough anymore. So I'm just gonna have to get my own copies so that he and I can have a conversation about the concept of infinity and who came up with it, because hint, could have been people in Nigeria. It also filled me with this great sense of rage that I was not taught about all of the friggin' awesome things that people on the African continent had already built or invented before colonizers came and fucked it all up. So yeah, really good book, highly recommend. Ashley was not wrong, everyone should read that one. So then I read The Body Is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love by Sonia Renee Taylor. And I think that if I had not spent the pandemic getting into meditation and yoga, this book would have definitely been a little bit too much like, call it wooey. Radical self-love, radical love in general is something that I'm still learning. It is something that I'm like actively trying to learn, because I think that it can only make lives better, and why would we not want that? Mia, hush. You don't have to bark. So I'm glad that I picked that one up. I think I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, because I don't know if it's one that I'll go back to and read again, but I did immediately go follow her on Instagram, so that's gonna mean something, right? And then I read my first actual physical book of the month of May. It's Dothead, poems by Amit Majmudar. Here, I'm trying to make it so you can see that illustration. Certainly a very evocative illustration on the cover there. And these poems really ran the emotional gamut. From some of them just made me giggle, some of them made me absolutely writhe in discomfort, in a good way, in that I'm learning and growing discomfort way. So some of my favorites were The Enduring Appeal of the Western Canon. The first line of that one. Michelangelo had the model for David pinch a grape with his buttocks. Surrealism was born when a young Louis Buñuel, peering through a hole in his landlady's bathroom, saw she had a small tail with a curl like a pig's. Caravaggio was a closet Muslim, converted at 23 by the Turkish dye merchant who supplied a rare brown needed for the Virgin Mary's eyes. Degas attended his first ballet in order to gawk through binoculars at naked ankles. Perspective in the first years of the technique, much like polyphony, made European churchgoers vomit. It continues. I won't read the whole thing. I really enjoyed it though. The other one that made me laugh is Love of Semicolons. And this one you really have to read it for yourself to appreciate the use of the punctuation in it. But I mean, who doesn't love a poem about punctuation? probably people that don't identify as nerds. There's some very long poems in here, some that are much shorter. None that I would say that I disliked, even the ones that made me very uncomfortable. And it certainly does have those. So yeah, this one my mom lent to me. It was her recommendation. She thinks she's getting it back, but she's wrong. It's mine now. Followed that one up with Afrofuturism. Check out that cover. The World of Black Sci-Fi and Fantasy Culture by Ytasha L. Womack. This book was fan-freaking-tastic. Just a great primer on Afrofuturism as a genre. It runs the gamut from music to comics to books to movies. Highly recommend reading this book. One, I highly recommend reading this book. Two, I highly recommend reading this book near a device that will let you tell it to play you random songs. Because the section on music, I had heard some of the names before, but had never listened to any of the music that was talked about in the book. And so I would definitely say, read it where you can say, smart device, play me music by Janelle Monáe, or by will.i.am, or Outkast, or, you know, talked about psychedelic and funk and jazz and just all kinds of music that I was very unfamiliar with. Which is not surprising, because my husband describes my taste in music as just bad. I listen to a lot of like pop country music, a lot of rock, but not things that are known for Black artists. I have only very, very recently started to develop a taste for hip hop or R&B or jazz or any of the other musical styles that were basically pioneered by Black folks. It's a gap in my education that I am trying to close. In addition to music, I got a lot of really great book recommendations out of this. I would say, like, I'm so glad that I bought this one, because look at some of each of the chapters has an illustration like that. This book was very, very hope-focused. Afrofuturism as a genre is very hope-focused. So it was just like, yes, it's nonfiction. I read a lot of nonfiction this month, but it just gave you those like happy feel-goods, and super educational. Really, really glad that I can't remember how I came across this one, but I'm very glad that I picked it up, because it was delightful and I learned a lot. So I followed that one with Detransition Baby by Tori Peters, who is a trans woman, and my friend Hazel recommended reading this book. And I was kind of on the fence because it didn't really seem like a story that was going to interest me. And then it came up in one of Jess Owen's videos that people were all upset because Tori Peters was nominated for a Women in Writing award, and there was a bunch of nasty, disgusting TERFs trying to claim that giving an award to her, a women's award to her, is the equivalent of giving one to a man, and all I have to say to those people is fuck you. A trans woman is a woman, a trans man is a man. And anyone that feels that biology is the end all be all can just fuck right off, really. I'm not gonna engage with those people because they're wrong. That's the hill I'm gonna die on. I will fight you on that one. So, I did want to see what all the fuss was about. I did end up getting the book from the library, and I was right in my initial assessment that it's not a story that was of particular interest to me. I do really like trans stories, but I am not a big reader of realistic fiction. The fiction that I tend to consume is almost always sci-fi or fantasy. If there isn't robots or magic, it's too much like the real world and I can't use it for escapism. But I also don't feel like I'm learning anything from it, which is probably not true. I think people do learn something from every single book that you read, but I just feel like if it's going to be that realistic, I'd rather it just be nonfiction. So this book I would say was very well written, but Reese as a character was completely uninteresting to me. It did remind me of, it was a very realistic depiction of queer culture as I remember it from when I was much more involved, mostly when I was in college. This one was much more self-aware than any of my friends in college were, because we were dumbass 18-year-olds that, you know, only thought we were adults. But it did include like everything that I remember disliking about being part of the queer community. And so I didn't find it enjoyable to read, basically. And all of the problems in the book seem to revolve around low self-esteem, poor communication, and bad decisions about who to have sex with. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for that last category. Make better decisions. So yeah, not my cup of tea, but still a very good book. So if you are into realistic fiction, I would recommend picking it up. But if you're like me and you want your fiction to have robots or magic, give this one a pass. And my last book that I finished in May was The Love and Lies of Rokhsana Ali by Sabina Khan. It started off as a very cute story, got very dark in the middle, and then ended everything on a kind of nicely, neatly wrapped up, got very cute again note. But basically this is the story of a 17-year-old Bengali Muslim woman who is a lesbian. She is in a relationship at the start of the book, which I thought was really fun because usually the young adult gay LGBTQ books, you have to go through the like, oh my god, am I gay? We just skipped all of that and went straight for, she already knows it. She is firm in her understanding of who she is as a person, which I thought was great. What I didn't think was so great about the book was that I could not stand her girlfriend. I thought that Rokhsana just kept making excuses for this girl and her parents that just refused to understand that Rokhsana was coming from a very, very different culture from her white American Christian girlfriend. And that, you know, so the said girlfriend and their friends kept putting pressure on her to come out to her parents, and Rokhsana kept saying, look guys, I can't do that, it's going to go very badly. Best case scenario, I get disowned. Worst case scenario, I get murdered. I don't feel like this is the right time. Let's give it a couple months. Let's finish high school. I've got this full ride to a prestigious university. Let's get into college before we blow everything up. And as it turns out, Rokhsana was dead on the money. Her parents found out that she was is a lesbian and whisked her off. Out, basically, you can't kidnap your own child, but that's essentially what happened, was that they took her back to the homeland, hid her passport, and told her that she can't go home until she's married. So there was much trials and tribulations from that point. I liked the book, except for the girlfriend. It just really drove me nuts that she couldn't get it. But again, 17-year-olds kind of have to make allowances for them because their brains aren't done cooking yet. So yeah, that was my last book in May. I'm gonna wrap this up now because you can probably see it in the video as I'm getting like pinker and pinker because it's really hot up here. And I can't turn the fan on because you won't be able to hear me. So I'm gonna stop here. I hope that y'all are staying safe. I hope you're staying hydrated, especially if you are somewhere where it is hot right now. And I love you all and have a great day. Bye.